Welcome everyone to the January Cavirin webinar, Full Stack Container Security, a Unified Approach. Many of you have probably heard the term full stack before in relation to the DevOps community, but here we're using it to describe the requirement to look at container security from a holistic approach. We start with the cloud provider, then go through the host operating system or hypervisor, through the container itself, what you need to do to secure the image, the orchestration layer, and then tying it together with integration into your CI/CD toolchain. And you'll see how to do it, how to effectively implement it in a quick and easy environment. The presenters today include Basha Manat, who's our Senior Director of Product Management, long career in the cloud space, the software space, including Yahoo, Flexera, and his responsibility is for security monitoring, the Cavirin cloud, and machine learning. So Basham, welcome. Thank you. And then after Basham, we'll turn it over to Vaidehi Rao, who's our Director of Engineering, leading efforts in container development, CloudTrail monitoring, and Docker. She also has deep experience in the software and SaaS and cloud environments, most recently at VMware. So Vaidehi, welcome.
Thank you, Dave.
What we'll talk about today are some of the challenges in terms of bringing the hybrid enterprise into the cloud, the Cavirin vision to address this, what we mean by full stack container security and how to implement it, a rather comprehensive demo covering the various aspects, a call to action that I think you'll all be really interested in, and then we'll open it to Q&A. Remember that Q&A is text-driven, so through your portal, just ask questions and we'll take them in turn. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Basha.
Hey, thank you, David. So, if you're like most companies that Cavirin deals with, you're already a hybrid enterprise. And what we mean by that is that you have a mix of physical and virtual machines and public cloud accounts. As it relates to this particular webinar, as you're probably already aware, containers are taking hold with respect to adoption. And what they actually enable is essentially a modularized microservice-based architecture. And some of the side effects of using containers is that they enforce consistent, conflict-free, and predictable application deployments. It also turns out that containers are being used quite heavily in highly scalable architectures and extremely high-velocity environments. Amazon.com, for example, pushes code to production every 11 seconds. Now, if you are a security and compliance professional, like the folks that you see on this particular slide, your job is now much more complex than ever before because you're dealing with a significant amount of diversity in terms of a hybrid enterprise. If you are a chief security officer, like the one that you see on this slide, you probably are interested in the overall risk and security of your enterprise, given the diversity. If you are a chief risk or compliance officer, then you are responsible for ensuring audit readiness with respect to the compliance regulations that you see on the slide. If you're a security ops professional, then your job is to essentially make sure that any gaps that we identify from a security or compliance perspective are prioritized for you and you're able to remediate them in an efficient manner. And last but not least, if you are responsible for DevOps or infrastructure, then you have to make sure that any software releases that you're doing on a nightly, daily, or weekly basis do not compromise security. So what does Cavirin do? So our view with respect to enabling a hybrid enterprise security model is essentially along these four pillars, if you will. The first pillar is what we call protection. That's really where we apply a whole bunch of policy packs or benchmarks, as we call them. These are based on, partly based on industry standards, partly based on Cavirin thought leadership. It's roughly about 20 policy packs that we have in the product today. And it spans about 80,000 control rules, if you will, that you can apply and test against, including things related to configuration management, vulnerability management, and so on. Now, based on that protection regime, you also need to make sure that on a reactive basis, you have to monitor your infrastructure as well for events that are going on in your infrastructure. And what Vaidehi will demonstrate today is two specific types of events that you need to be aware of. One is within your cloud account. AWS is what we will demonstrate today. And the second being at the level of individual containers that you might be using in your infrastructure. A third leg is really what we call response. So once we go through the protection and monitoring phase, you may have gaps that you identify in your compliance or security posture, and as a security ops professional, it's your job to actually remediate any gaps that you find. And last but not least, we are looking at, in our roadmap, looking at the prediction aspect of security as well. So we have a lot of data from our customers, and is it possible for us to actually make predictions based on the data that we have with respect to emerging threats, emerging risk, and how that affects your security posture and what you can do to protect yourself. So now that said, what does full stack container security mean? So our vision is to essentially apply the same 4 pillars that you see on this slide at the level of the cloud account, Azure, AWS, or GCP. The next level up the stack is really the virtualization layer, which might be hosting one or more operating systems like Windows, Ubuntu, and so on. And then the actual container runtime like Docker that is running on top of the OS, and possibly an orchestration layer if you happen to use it like Kubernetes, Mesos, and so on. Right? So what we mean by full stack container security is essentially applying these 4 pillars to the different layers in this particular stack. Before we jump into the weeds, I want to give you some quick stats here. So this is again from a publicly available document. Basically, Docker adoption and container adoption in general is growing, as this statistic actually shows between 2015 and 2017. As of 2017, about 35% of medium to large organizations are using Docker in some fashion. There are lots of stats on the slide. The one that's most significant from a security perspective is the idea that containers are enabling extremely dense environments. So 7 containers per Docker host is what the stat is. The average life of a container is about 2.5 days versus 23 days for a virtual machine. What that actually means in security terms is that if you have errors in configuring your containers can actually do a lot of harm very, very quickly. So it's something that you keep in mind. Now, let's go through a quick example with respect to what full stack container security actually means. So imagine you have an application that contains 3 microservices, let's say A, B, and C in yellow, gray, and pink. So the first level of security is making sure that the images that are being used in these containers come from protected sources, trusted sources, if you will. So, one of the things that Vaidehi will demonstrate is really the idea that how do you actually make sure that the images that you're using in your containers themselves come from protected and safe sources, and they're actually scanned for vulnerabilities. So that's step 1. Step 2 is really around making sure that the operating system that is actually hosting the container runtime and the containers themselves is also safe and protected, and we'll talk about what that actually means in the next slide. The third aspect of container security is actually monitoring events that might be going on inside the containers themselves. And in general, what you want to keep in mind is that containers, if you configure them correctly, they're intended to be immutable. However, the problem is you may not be configuring them correctly all the time, and therefore you might be running into trouble. And hence, monitoring actually helps you keep track of that aspect of security. The fourth aspect of full stack container security is really the orchestration layer. What we actually support today is Kubernetes, but the general idea there is that when you run a Kubernetes cluster, you want to make sure that the master and worker nodes are correctly configured from a security standpoint, and you continue to monitor them on an ongoing basis. Last but not least, the AWS account, or in general the public cloud account which is hosting this entire infrastructure itself needs to be monitored for all the accounts, the services they're using, and from a monitoring standpoint as well. Again, you see that in the demo that we present today. And finally, one of the key trends that we are noticing among our customer base is that security is moving to the left-hand side, meaning from a software development cycle, moving security concerns upstream into the development cycle itself, what some people call DevSecOps. But the general idea is that in order for you to manifest DevSecOps in any meaningful manner, you need to have integration of security frameworks as part of your continuous integration, continuous deployment frameworks like a Puppet, or like Jenkins, like Bamboo, and so on. And again, we'll demonstrate that in our demonstration as well. Just to summarize, the 6 aspects of full stack container security: using safe images, securing your container hosts, monitoring container activity, safe orchestration at the level of the container orchestrator like Kubernetes, protecting and monitoring your cloud account, and ensuring DevOps integration is something that you want to look for in these kinds of products. So onto the first layer, how do you actually protect containers? The way Cavirin approaches it is that we actually have a whole bunch of control frameworks and benchmarks. A couple of them have been authored by Cavirin ourselves. So for example, the orchestration benchmark related to CI's Kubernetes policy pack is something that Cavirin has authored, in addition to the CI's benchmark for the Docker host itself. Those are 2 examples of benchmarks that we have authored. Generally, the idea there is that if you're going top-down, as it relates to safe images, there are actually 2 policy packs that you can apply. The first one is essentially making sure that your Docker images that you're consuming are themselves safe. That's one aspect. So that's the Cavirin Docker image hardening policy pack that you see on the top left corner. And then the second benchmark that you can actually apply is really what we call the Cavirin image and patches vulnerability. So making sure that the images that you're consuming are free from any known software vulnerabilities. Again, these are two policy packs that you can apply right during the development stage of your application and make sure that you're consuming safe software, if you will. The second layer that you see here is around securing the container host itself. So like I said before, a couple of policy packs that are container and container host specific. The CI's Docker benchmark for the Docker Community Edition. That's what you see, which is authored by Cavirin. And then the second, which has to do with patches and vulnerabilities for Linux-based systems, which again you want to apply against your container host. And then a whole bunch of other benchmarks that are more based on industry standards like NIST, HIPAA, PCI, and so on that you see on the slide again is something that you can turn on against your container host itself. The general idea here is that there is about 20 plus policy packs in the Cavirin product with about 80,000 controls. So again, pretty comprehensive in terms of what you can do from securing your infrastructure from a proactive standpoint. As it relates to monitoring containers, like I said before, containers, if you configure them correctly, are intended to be immutable. However, the challenge is, getting the details right with respect to ensuring the right level of isolation between your containers. And the key concepts within containers are this notion of namespaces and control groups. The problem with namespaces and control groups is that they need to be configured correctly. And if you make a mistake there, it basically means that you might actually compromise. Containers can see what's going on in each other's environments, and as a result, they compromise security. Another aspect of container security also essentially makes sure that the host and the containers are protected from each other as well. So again, misconfiguration at that level can also lead to security flaws. So the point is, container events essentially are a way, so think of them as a safety valve, if you will, where if you do make a mistake during configuration, you can potentially catch it by monitoring what's going on inside the container. A few quick examples of the kinds of things that by they will be demonstrating. So for example, if there are suspicious users that are somehow instantiating containers, you want to track that. Privilege escalation is again a common indicator of risk or compromise, if you will. So that's really an example where users are getting added to a privileged group like the sudo group or the Docker group on your container host. So again, we show examples where you can actually detect that. And then suspicious services. One of the common kinds of things that are going on in container environments is folks that are actually starting Bitcoin mining on your infrastructure. right? So that's an example of a suspicious service that you want to be aware of, and again, monitoring can help you with that. Now, monitoring alone is not adequate, so you have to also notify a security ops user to make sure that they can actually take action on whatever's happening in your environment. And the channels that we support today are the ones that are listed on here. So email, Slack, PagerDuty, and notifications in the Cavirin dashboard itself. So again, the idea there is that you'll see an alert pop up. You'll see this in the demo again. And the responsibility for the security ops user is to actually act on that using the information that we give you. And like I said before, how do you actually operationalize all this from a secure application development perspective? So there again, DevSecOps is sort of the emerging industry term for it. But here's an example of what that workflow might look like in practice. So you've got a couple of happy developers on this slide. So you've got the app developer on the left and an infrastructure code person that's with an IT ops that is essentially checking in code into a source code repository. At that point, your Jenkins is an example of a CI/CD platform, or it could be Bamboo as well. So the CI/CD platform kicks in, and the Jenkins plugin is essentially constructing the images and pushing them into a image repository like Docker Hub that you see on this slide. Now at that point, you can actually invoke the Cavirin plugin for your CI/CD environment. So Cavirin is an API-driven environment. So what Vaidehi will show you is a sample plugin that we've written, but the APIs are fully documented. You can do pretty much whatever you want and write your own plugins if you like. But in any case, the idea here is that the Cavirin plugin is invoked as part of your CI/CD pipeline, and then it's essentially going to run, it's going to download the image from the image repository and run a set of benchmarks that you configured for it. Now, what you'll see in Vaidehi's demo is that you can actually define like a target health score for your infrastructure itself. Let's say you say, I need a score of 80 before I push anything into my environment. So if that check passes as a result of the Cavirin plugin, then you might actually proceed to the next stage of the pipeline, which might be to push your code into dev, test, staging, and so on. And again, you can have different rules or policies with respect to dev, test, staging, and production. Now, if you don't meet the test, and let's say you get a score less than 80, then you want to flag that to a security ops professional, and their job essentially is to make sure that the images are actually hardened and protected from vulnerabilities. Again, you see this in the demo. And that's the general idea. How do you actually take security considerations upstream into your development cycle? By doing CI/CD integration, and that's the key point that we'll demonstrate today. So with that, I want to hand off to Vaidehi here, and she's going to take us through 5 mini demos that you see listed on the slide.
Thanks, Basham, for a very good presentation. Hello, everyone. Now let's have a demo on full-stack container security by going over Cavirin's security offering for Docker image, containers, and Docker host, as well as the real-time monitoring capabilities for Docker containers and CloudTrail event. We will also go over as how our security offerings can be integrated with CI/CD pipeline. So let me just go ahead and share my screen. So here, this is our UI that we have at Cavirin. So we have come to our My Groups page. The way we create a My Group is, we go to Discovery and Access, and we have a concept of a group creation for a cloud and an on-prem. So we just have to create an AWS cloud account, and here at Cavirin, we would go ahead and identify what all infrastructure are in your environment. But before we delve into this, let's quickly go over our initial presentation, which would be Docker image scanning. So to do that Docker image scanning, we first go to Discovery and Access, go to a particular Docker image. So here in this page, we could go and find out any public registries as well as private registries. We can add, let's go ahead and add Redis. So if it is a private registry, we could go ahead and add the credentials to access that particular image. So, so we go and add policies. we have two policies for Docker image. That would be image hardening policies as well as vulnerability policies. So image hardening policy is authored by Cavirin. So let's quickly see what we offer here. We have we check for permissions against many packaged folders. So if we go to the details of a particular policy, we show how this particular policy has been audited and what is the remediation step in case of failure. We also have vulnerability package, and this vulnerability package is basically we get it from industry standard national vulnerability database. So we have packaged all these vulnerabilities into one particular package. So if we go and go to the next page, here we have a scheduling page where we have given the client complete flexibility at what point in time they would want to schedule this particular assessment. We could do either run the test right now or also for a later stage. So we also have offerings like it could be daily, it could be scanned daily, weekly, monthly, and also a custom configuration. We could also provide notifications. When the scan is complete, we provide notifications. So for this demo, we let's just select current right now. So right now our, so let's go to the report page. We have already generated a few reports in the past. If we go to this report page, we see a total score of 77. And here we have all the policies, 73 policies that we have targeted against. So there are past failed policies. We can filter against what are our failed policies and what are our past policies. So when we have failed, the client would be very much interested in remediating these policies. So we have remediation steps like Chef and Ansible. We provide a template for Chef recipe. We provide a template. We can also, the client can go in and add the command to run to remediate, and we can download and save it. So whenever we want to remediate the policies, we go ahead and apply this particular recipe. Same thing with Ansible. We provide a template about a template for running our Ansible playbook. So along with this, now let's go to our, this is what we give for our Docker image scanning. Now let's go to our Docker host scanning capabilities. So, in order to do this, we basically go to our discovery and access. We create an AWS cloud account. So when we go to an AWS cloud account, we identify what all are the Docker, what all instances are available, and identify what are those instances in which we have Docker host running. And once we have that, we apply our Docker CIS benchmark to all these instances. But we also have to provide cloud credentials because we need these credentials to get into those boxes and apply these policies. So this is how we create a group, and let me show you how the actual assessment. We have already created one particular group. If you go to this assessment, we have these Docker CIS policies, right, that we have targeted against. And this is basically industry standard policies, CIS benchmark. It is authored by Cavirin. We have different levels of host configuration, Docker daemon configurations, container images, container runtime, Docker security operations, as well as Swarm. So let's go to the report where we have already targeted one of our CIS benchmarks. Come here. While it is opening, again, it is just as before. We would see a total risk score, and also it shows that before that, we come to a page which identifies in our infrastructure, cloud infrastructure, let's say there are 100 instances. So we would show only those instances which has Docker host. in it. So in this case, we have just one particular resource, so we are interested in only that particular resource. So we give the user the capability to get into that particular instance and show a detailed report for that particular instance. Again, just as before, we have filtering for all the fail policies, all the pass policies, and also we show the remediation that could be taken in the form of Chef. They could do Chef remediation or use Ansible. We provide a template on how to achieve that. In addition to all that, we also provide the detailed report in the form of PDF and Excel. So this is throughout for any report that we would generate. So let's move on to our next part of the demonstration, which is monitoring. So as a part of our monitoring, we have monitoring capabilities for runtime containers as well as CloudTrail. So to enable runtime container monitoring, it is as simple as creating a group. Just as before, we create a group, and once we create a cloud group or an on-prem group, we provide the user to select monitoring. It could be either cloud containers. We also later down the road we will provide instance and cluster, but for the time being we have container monitoring. So it's as simple as checking a container the monitoring, and we would take care of the rest in the backend. So what we do is, just as before, when a cloud AWS cloud account is created, we go ahead and identify all the instances in this particular group, identify what are the Docker instances, and we track all these containers and gather all the activities that are happening within that container. So in order to see what activities we have tracked, we have an RS page where we could go ahead and create an alert. So here in this alert, we basically say what alert you want to do. What is the severity level? Is it low, medium, high? How would you want to track this alert? And as well as we could select either a cloud group or on-prem group. For a container, it would be a cloud group, but for a cloud trail, it would be a cloud account. We will come back to that in our next demonstration. So when we select a container group, so this is where we have enabled container monitoring. We should select a threshold metrics, and these are the 4 events that we offer. One is adding new user in a container. Any new user that is added in a container, we can trigger an alert for you. Adding new user to a specific group, adding user to a pseudo group, and new services started within a container. So at this point in time, we can track 4 alerts, but we are not just limited to these. Down the lane, we would be adding many more events. But when we select, let's say, adding new services in a container, starting new services in a container, we could have different conditions that we have. Let's say a user adds a threshold of 5, and within a day. Let me just briefly explain what we are actually talking about here. So when a user goes ahead and creates an alert with this particular condition, we are basically saying that in one particular instance, for a given container, if 5 services are started, we do not create an alert within a day. But for the 6th service that is started within that particular container, we now trigger an alert for you. So we are giving the capability in the hands of our client as to what their alerting is, like what do they expect within their container, what level of activity are they expecting. So this is the control we are completely giving to our client. In addition to that, we also provide notifications in the form of email, PagerDuty, and Slack. So for email, we have to specify our email address. It's as simple as this. And our Cavirin system will take care of sending the email notification as well as PagerDuty and Slack. So this is how we would be generating an alert. Let me show the generated alert. So here if you see a container services, for this particular day we have, this is for one single day, we have 4 events that are generated. Let's go into the detailed report of this particular event. We show detail in the form of a chart, and also these are the 4 events that the client could go and see what activity has happened. Right? If we go to a detail of one particular alert, we could see that a service Nginx got started. So these are the information that we would give the user. He could go and see what all services are started within that particular container. And it is up to the client to take necessary actions. As we provide real-time notification in the form of email and Slack, they can take those steps right away. So let me show you what notification, how we provide the notification in our Slack. So this is one of the alerts that happened, and we basically give a complete detail of what container, what service name triggered the alert, and what point in time we see this alert. Same thing goes with our email notification. If you see here, we have, and we also sent an email giving a brief detail of what this alert is, what point in time it occurred, what is the threshold level for this particular alert. So along with this, we also give a notification in the dashboard. So we have all the list of what all events happened at what point in time. And if we go to the detailed page, we would see the report, just as before. Same. So now, so this is what we offer for our runtime container monitoring. So now let's move on to our monitoring capabilities in AWS account for CloudTrail monitoring capabilities. So to enable CloudTrail monitoring, it is as simple as creating a cloud account and enable monitoring. We just have to click enable monitoring, and we have to pick an S3 bucket where we gather all these CloudTrail events. And if we see, we have a collection window of 1 day, 1 week, and 1 month. Basically what this collection window means is that we collect the data and we retain the data only either for 2 days, or 1 week, or 1 month. So for about a month or so, we can give you all the alerts that happened for that month, and so on, either 2 days or 1 week. And this particular, let me come back to this RSC page. Just like before in runtime containers, we have this page, alert creation page, where we can go ahead and create a new alert. User can define the alert name as well as the severity. Is it low, medium, or high? Depends basically what he considers as a high or a medium. And based on that, they can take certain actions. So here in the group, they have to check cloud account. Once they select the cloud account, threshold, and events. Now these are the events. We have 5 events that we offer for CloudTrail monitoring. One is failed console login, launched instances, API authorization errors, ACL change with all allowed ingress, modifications of VPC. Now you see only 5 events, but we are not limited to just 5 events. Down the road we would be adding many more events. But if you see, just as before, the threshold concept is the same. We have the time duration could be either 1 hour, 4 hour, 8 hours, 16 hours, 1 day. Let's say we take an event called failed console login for a day, like a threshold of 5, and condition would be greater than. So what this means is, if to generate this particular alert, at the most we could have 5 failed console logins. If we see a 6th failed login within a day, the client will be notified, an alert will be generated. And again, the notification is in the form of an email, PagerDuty, as well as Slack. So we have already generated a few events, one for launched instances, failed console login, API authorization, and ACL. Let's go into the detail of failed console login. In failed console logins, let's see, there was only 1 alert that happened. But if you see, we have enough detail as to where this occurred, what region this particular alert occurred in, and what is the collection window, which user basically created this alert, right? From which user created this failed console login. So we get that information. So we have enough details in this event so that the client can go in and take any necessary actions that are needed. So to wrap up, this is what we had. Oh, before that, very important one. We have to do a CI/CD pipeline. Let's not forget that. Let's show that. So what we offer at Cavirin is basically it's API based. So it is very easy to integrate with our CI/CD pipeline. So for the sake of this demo, we have integrated with a Jenkins plugin, which is, let me just quickly log into that. So this is our dashboard where we have two projects. So let's basically go into one of this projects. In this project, what I would be demoing is, now in this, the user has the capability to pull any image of their choice. We have listed a private registry, private image. It is a image name is Maruti and the tag is Mongo. Since it is a private image, we have to provide the registry username and password. But since it is a Jenkins plugin, we also need access to our Pulsar box, and that is achieved by providing a username and called administrator. And here we have provided Cavirin1234 as the password to log into our Pulsar box. And if you see here, we have Cavirin platform address, which is basically the Pulsar IP address. So what happens when a build is run with this particular configuration? Let's go to the, so what happens is internally this plugin basically takes that image that is defined here. Let me quickly go over this image. Okay, image, hardening policy image has been selected. So what happens is we internally, we pull this particular image, run this policy, hardening policy, and we have a target score which basically is set to 90 or 80. So if our policy is failed, if it is more than, if the risk score is more than 80, we would pass it, and if it is lesser than 80, it would be a failed build. So if you see here, we have run some build in the past. We have a failed build. Yeah, let's go over this particular failed build, console output. If you see, we have let me just quickly put this. Yeah, so if you see here, right, it's failed policies. We have filter count of 19. We have a scan of which is 77, and our target score is set to 80, but this is a failed policy. We have given all the policies, listed all the policies here, which triggered for the failure. So this is one of the builds that passed. And if you see, we have a target score of 99. Target score of 99, which is more than our golden scores. Only one policy failed, and hence the build passed. So this is one of our Jenkins plugins that we have provided, but we could create any plugins that you desire, because ours, since it is API based, you can use our plugin to scan any policy, apply any policies, and integrate with your CI/CD pipeline. So let me quickly go over what we actually did. We basically demoed. Let me log into this. So we demoed how at Cavirin we can harden Docker image hosts and containers by applying industry standard benchmarks. We also showed our monitoring capabilities for runtime containers and CloudTrail. We also showed how we could integrate with our with any CI/CD pipeline. CI/CD, we showed Jenkins, but we are not just limited to Jenkins. We could also use TeamCity, Bamboo, any one of the tools that are available. So when you come to Cavirin, it is a one-stop shop where you can harden the infrastructure by applying industry standard benchmarks and get real-time alerts and notifications for any drift or activity in your infrastructure with our monitoring capabilities. As our system is API-based, you can easily integrate our system our security capabilities in any CI/CD pipeline. So thank you all for taking the time to attend our presentation and demo. Thank you. So Dave would be taking over.
Thank you, Vaidehi. So just a few last words from our end. Once again, the whole webinar will be posted on the BrightTalk portal within the next hour. What we have announced at AWS reInvent, and it's really available for prime time now, is Cavirin Cloud. And what we invite all of you to do is go to cavirin.com/SaaS. You can sign up, it's self-serve, for a 14-day trial of pretty much everything you saw demonstrated here. And this will allow you to understand what you can do to quickly and effectively implement full-stack container security. If you need any help from us, there's a chat window where you can talk to the engineers and the product managers. If you'd like to see additional information on what we're talking about, go to our website under the Solutions section. The DevOps-Security will give you some more background on containers, on orchestration, on DevOps and DevSecOps, and then we have a number of different articles that we've published on our blog.